Once, when his wisdom was less great, Odin had lived in the world of men. Frigga, his queen, lived with him then. They lived in a bleak island, and they were known as Grimnir the fisherman and his wife. Always Odin and Frigga were watching over the sons of men, watching to know which ones they could foster and train, so that they might have the strength and spirit to save the world from the power of giants. And while they were staying on the bleak island, Odin and Frigga saw the sons of King Odin, and both thought that the spirit of heroes could be fostered within them. Odin and Frigga made plans to bring the boys to them so that they might be able to care and train them. One day the boys went out fishing. A storm came and drove their boat to the rocks of the island where Odin and Frigga lived. They brought them to their hut, Odin and Frigga did, and they told them that they would care for them and train them through the winter, and in the spring they could build a boat and go back to their father's land. "We shall see," said Odin to Frigga one night. "We shall see which of the two can be formed into the noblest hero." He said that because Frigga favored one of the boys and he favored the other. Frigga thought very well of the elder boy, Agnar. He had a gentle voice and quiet and kindly ways. But Odin thought more of the younger boy. Gerard, his name was. He was strong and passionate, with a high and loud voice. Odin took Gerard into his charge, and he showed him how to fish and hunt. He made the boy even bolder than he was, by making him leap from rock to rock, and by letting him climb the highest cliffs and jump across the widest chasms. He would bring him to the den of the bear and make him fight for his life with the spear that he had made for him. Agnar went to the chase, too, and he showed his skill and boldness. But Gerard overcame him in nearly every trial. "What a hero Gerard will be," Odin would often say. Agnar stayed often with Frigga. He stayed beside her as she spun, listening to the tales she told, asking such questions as he thought brought him more and more wisdom. And Agnar heard of Asgard and of the dwellers in Asgard, and how they protected Midgard, the world of men, from the giants of Jotunheim. Agnar, though he did not speak out, said in his own mind that he would give all his life and all his strength and all his thoughts to helping the work of the gods. Spring came, and Odin built a boat for Gerard and Agnar. They could now go back to their own country. And before they set out, Odin told Gerard that one day he would come to visit him. "And do not be too proud to receive a fisherman in your hall, Gerard," said Odin. "A king should give welcome to the poorest who come to his hall." "I will be a hero, no doubt of that," Gerard answered. "And I would be a king, too, only Agnar Littlegood was born before me." Agnar bade goodbye to Frigga and to Odin, thanking them for the care they had taken of them. He looked into Frigga's eyes, and he told her that he would strive to learn how he might fight the battle for the gods. The two went to the boat and rowed away. They came near to the place of King Odin's realm. They saw the castle overlooking the sea. Then Gerard did a terrible thing. He turned the boat back towards the sea, and he cast the oars away. Then, for he was fit to swim the swiftest, roughest sea, and to climb the highest cliffs, he plunged into the water, and he struck out towards the shore. And Agnar, left without oars, went drifting off to sea. Gerard climbed the high cliffs and came to his father's castle. King Odin, who had given up both his sons for lost, was rejoiced to see him. Gerard told of Agnar that he had fallen out of the boat on their way back, and he had been drowned. King Odin, who had thought both of his sons were gone, was glad enough that one had come back. He put Geirrod beside him on the throne, and when he died, Geirrod was made king over the people. And now Odin, having drunk from Mimir's well, went through the kingdoms of men, judging kings and simple people according to the wisdom that he had gained. He came at last to the kingdom that Geirrod ruled over. Odin thought that of all the kings he had judged to be noble, Geirrod would most certainly be the most noble. He went to the king's house as a wanderer, blind in one eye, wearing a cloak of dark blue with a wanderer's staff in his hands. As he drew near the king's house, men on dark horses came riding towards him. The first of the men did not turn his horse as he came near the wanderer, but rode on, nearly trampling him to the ground. And as they came before the king's house, the men on the dark horses shouted for servants. Only one servant was in the stable, and he came out and took the horse of the first man. Then the others told the wanderer to tend to their horses. He had to hold the stirrups for some of them to dismount. Odin knew who the first man was. He was Geirrod, the king, and he knew who the man who served in the stable was. He was Agnar, Geirrod's brother. By the wisdom he had gained, he knew that Agnar had come back to his father's kingdom in the guise of a servant, and he knew that Geirrod did not know who this servant was. They went into the stable together. Agnar took bread and broke it and gave some to the wanderer. He gave him, too, some straw to set himself upon. But in a while Odin said, "I would set myself at the fire in the king's hall and eat my supper of meat." "Nay, stay here," Agnar said. "I will give you more bread and a wrap to cover yourself in. Do not go to the door of the king's house, for the king is angry today, and he might repulse you." "How?" said Odin. "A king turn away a wanderer who comes to his door? It cannot be that he would do that." "Today he is angry," Agnar said. Again he begged him not to go to the door of the king's house. But Odin rose up from the straw upon which he was seated and went to the door. A porter, hunchbacked with long arms, stood at the door. "I am a wanderer, and I would have rest and food in the king's hall," said Odin. "Not in this king's hall," said the hunchbacked porter. He would have barred the door to Odin, but the voice of the king called him away. Odin then strode into the hall and saw the king at table with his friends, all dark-bearded and cruel-looking men. And when Odin looked on them, he knew that the boy whom he had trained in nobility had become a king over robbers. "Since you have come into the hall where we eat, sing to me, wanderer," shouted one of the dark men. I will sing to you," said Odin. Then he stood between two of the stone pillars in the hall, and he sang a song reproaching the king for having fallen into an evil way of life and denouncing all for following the cruel way of robbers. "Seize him," said the king when Odin's song was finished. The dark men threw themselves upon Odin and put chains around him. They bound him between two stone pillars of the hall. "He came into this hall for warmth? It is warmth he shall have," said Geirrod. He called upon his servants to heap up wood around him. They did this. Then the king, with his own hand, put a blazing torch to the wood, and the wood blazed up around the wanderer. It burned and burned all around him, but the fire did not burn the flesh of Odin Allfather. The king and the king's friends stood around, watching with delight as fires blazed around a living man. The wood all burned away, and Odin was left standing there with his terrible gaze fixed upon the men who were so hard and cruel. They went to sleep, leaving him chained to the pillars of stone. Odin could have broken the chains and pulled down the pillars, but he wanted to see what else would happen in the king's house. The servants were ordered not to bring food or drink to him. But at dawn, when no one else was around, Agnar came to him and brought him a horn of ale and gave it to him to drink. The next evening, when the king came back from his robberies, and when he and his friends, sitting down at the table, had eaten like wolves, he ordered the wood again to be placed around Odin, and again they stood around watching in delight as the fire played around a living man. And as before, Odin stood there, unhurt by the fire, his steady and terrible gaze fixed upon the king. This made the king hate him more and more. All day he was kept in chains, and the servants were forbidden to bring him food or drink. None knew that a horn of ale was brought him at dawn. Night after night, for 8 nights, this went on. Then on the 9th night, when the fires around him had been lighted, Odin lifted up his voice and began to sing a song. His song became louder and louder, and the king and the king's friends and the servants of the king's house had to stand still and listen to it. Odin sang about Gerard, the king, how the gods had protected him, giving him strength and skill, and how instead of making a noble use of that strength and skill, he had made himself like one of the wild beasts. Then he sang of how the vengeance of the gods was about to fall upon this ignoble king. The flames died down, and Gerard and his friends saw before them not a friendless wanderer, but one who looked more kingly than any king of the earth. The chain fell down from his body, and he advanced towards the evil company. Then Gerard rushed upon him with his sword in hand to try to kill him. The sword struck him, but Odin remained unhurt. Thy life runs out, the gods they are wroth with thee. Draw near if thou darest, Odin thou shalt see. So Odin sang, and in fear of his terrible gaze, Gerard and his company shrank away. And as they shrank away, they were changed into beasts, into the wolves that ranged the forest. And Agnar came forward, and him Odin declared to be king. All the folk were glad when Agnar came to rule over them, for they had been oppressed by Gerard and his cruel reign, and Agnar was not only kind, but he was strong and victorious in his rule.